But what happens when you've got that much money floating around the system, you don't necessarily notice all the inefficiencies, right? You're able to pay people, pay a lot of people, high salaries, work for a long period of time, hire consulting companies, pay for a lot of technology and so forth. But you don't necessarily realize the inefficiency. And so there's this analogy within the lean world that unless you lower the water level in a stream, you won't notice all the big boulders in the stream. And so what we're doing with value stream management partly is we're lowering the water level and we're starting to look like what is the actual work process. So you can begin to see you've got these incredible inefficiencies that are embedded in this whole process as the IT world moves towards maturity as a discipline. It becomes much more competitive, and there's much greater need to optimize, and there's much bigger difference between the teams that have successfully optimized and the teams that have not successfully optimized. And that's really kind of what we're talking about here. Hi, I'm Andrew Davis.
And I'm Steve Pereira.
And this
is the Value Stream Show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Value Stream Show. So today we're going to talk about value stream management, which is the crown jewel of work on the value stream side, sort of the culmination of a lot of the topics we've talked about up to this point, and just sort of level setting on what is value stream management and so forth. So Steve, why don't you kick us off? How would you define value stream management?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we should talk about is really that this is such a big topic that, we're going to be talking about a lot. I think we're going to revisit this from many, many different angles because there's all kinds of different areas within value stream management that deserve their own attention. And they're also, currently being discovered and evolved and, changing rapidly as folks are paying closer attention to things like value stream management. So that's just a little asterisk to say that, we'll be back here. But, from a high level, I think what's really important about value stream management is this concept of looking at the work holistically, like the end-to-end flow of work in an organization in such a way that you're focused on improving that flow of work, right? It's not just looking at it and measuring it. You're doing that for the reason that you hope to improve the system. And you want to find out where to spend your time and your effort, where it will get the most return on that investment. And I think that's, kind of the basics. And then it gets a lot more specific from there, especially when we're talking about technology and knowledge work. Does that line up with how you would characterize it? What are the main pieces that stand out for you when you think about value stream management, Andrew?
Yeah, certainly it is that end-to-end view of the process and looking for, looking at that through the lens of optimization, trying to find, key bottlenecks and inefficiencies, areas of waste and so forth. But definitely layering in this aspect of ongoing management as opposed to the topic we touched on previously, value stream mapping, which is about creating that shared clarity about what is the process together that we're all working on, and maybe getting some rough metrics on a one-time basis. But value stream management is really that ongoing process of using the value stream as the framework through which we think about progress, like on a week-to-week or day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. How are things going? Are we making progress? Are we slipping back? Those kinds of things. Looking at those questions through the framework of value stream thinking, I think is the key thing. And we certainly should add on to this. We'll come back to it later in the session, I think, about the tooling aspects of that. And that's a fast emerging, I think was one of the things you were alluding to when we talk about emerging space. There's an increasing number of tools arising to help facilitate this value stream management process.
I want to come back to the aspect of kind of continuity here and the scope of what we think of when we think of value stream management. Like, it's in many ways a way of looking at the work, but management being a continuous process of making sure that things are on track and getting better over time. Part of the reason why we're talking about value stream management now is that it's like we've had a lot of success with gradually increasing efforts of expanding the scope of how we look at work, right? We came from projects, we came from looking at just development, like agile, or just a sprint, or just a specific product team. And we've seen a lot of success with that. But as you see success, you start looking further and further for increasing effect of your efforts. And it's also due to an increased level of capability, right? We can now see further through tooling and automation. But I think what's really made all of this possible is just expanding the way that we think, right? It's kind of a mindset shift in the industry, certainly from projects to products, and products being long-lived, evolving artifacts, or these almost organisms that continue to grow. We're looking also beyond things like DevOps, right? Like, we're not just concerned with software development and software operation, or even SRE or security or design. We now know very clearly what it takes to ship a product and keep it running. The day two operations, like the things that contribute to keeping things moving well or keeping things evolving, is increasingly complex, but increasingly available in terms of like understanding all those moving pieces, all the complexity that it takes to do that well. And I think of value stream management as a way of doing that, way of setting your mind to that big picture, the long term, and give you a way of addressing concerns in the short term, right? In the service of the long term, I'm going to identify challenges and opportunities in the work today that are going to pay off so I can move on to the next thing and evolve and continue to improve.
And right, in service to the long term, especially, there is this investment in continuous process improvement. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of Lean, is taking process improvement as a first-class responsibility of the team. This, that the improvement of daily work is the work. So that, I think, is critical. A couple of things come to mind, like when you mention, we're expanding the scope of this discussion beyond just DevOps and the software development process. If we think about Mark Andreessen's quote, software is eating the world. Clearly, software is eating the enterprise. We're talking about digital transformations. Gradually, what we're ending up with, or what we're moving towards, is digitally defined businesses, or software-defined enterprise, where all of your business processes are in one way or another routed through IT systems. And so there's this mixing naturally of concerns about, there is no clean separation of concerns between software development and concerns for the business productivity. The business is run on software. And so when you're looking at value stream management, really you're looking at any end-to-end business process. We're obviously software-focused, software professionals, and so we're looking at that from the lens of the software development process, but we're also looking at, how do you optimize any business process. Value stream management is really a very broad, very general concept. Yeah, software development being one of many business processes, but the same lens can be applied to all of these things.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've got to come back to in a future episode. This idea that, what constitutes a value stream, insofar as it's a valuable model to use for a given scenario, right? Does it make sense to think about incident management in the context of a value stream? Does it make sense to think of customer onboarding in the context of a value stream? Marketing efforts, going to a conference and staffing a booth and collecting leads and converting those leads into prospects. Is that a value stream? Is it useful to think about that in terms of a flow of work, in the same way that we think about knowledge work or even manufacturing, right? And building physical products. And there's a giant section of the world that is physical and virtual at the same time. Right? Building software, building physical products, integrating those two things. I think that's a area of the world that is kind of underserved by our current focus on, okay, well, the old world is lean Six Sigma manufacturing. The new world is software, agile DevOps. And, they run by very different ways of thinking, very different attitudes, very different cultures. But I think, more and more we're seeing these things blend together. There's so much opportunity to mix these models and what works in the physical world, what works well that we can borrow from, what works well in the software world that we can borrow from, and how do we help those companies that are trying to do things like, ship medical devices that need software to manage them. And, increasingly we have physical devices that have AI to keep them performing at their peak, right? Make sure that they're not falling apart or that they're doing what they're supposed to. Like, one of my favorite client experiences was for medical devices, and the world that they have to live in is incredibly complex because they have software and they have a release cadence for their software, but they have a release cadence for their hardware, and then they have regulatory obligations that mandate a specific release cadence that needs to be accommodated. And to line up all those things, the physical device being ready to ship, the software being ready to deploy onto that hardware, and to be present in the cloud where it connects to overarching services, and then lining that all up with the regulatory obligations where, we have to put this in front of regulators. They've got to look at it. It's got to be analyzed and tested to various standards, and some of that is internal, some of it's external. Thinking of those flows in terms of a value stream network, and as this collection of value streams, and the fact that none of that happens once, right? It's increasingly just constant, and you want it to be as fast as possible, even in a highly regulated environment, means that this practice of value stream management is just so critical to making that happen. And without it, you will get that work done, right? I mean, the work's going to get done regardless, but thinking about that type of work, the complexity of that work through the lens of value stream management, means you're making decisions, you're seeing things connect in ways that I think are very valuable, so that you don't have the cracks between, okay, well, we have this over here, this over here. They should connect together, but they don't really, because we don't really have this overarching model or strategy around how that's going to work.
And so let me sort of wrap up this section on what is value stream management as an introduction by just summarizing the systems that we're operating inside business and technology are not linear. They're massive, sprawling. Everything's connected to everything else. Impossibly complicated to fully understand or map out or keep track of everything. But within that, you've got these little pockets or islands of relatively linear processes that are repeated. And so I think that's really the area that we're focusing on with value stream management. It is where there is a relatively linear process that is repeated again and again and again, where there's an opportunity to optimize that process, that can then have enormously beneficial effects that cascade out throughout the rest of the system. And it could be any combination: hardware, software, human, manual, manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've been talking about enabling development teams to have greater impact on their business. So I want to pause briefly to talk about the next generation of development teams and to thank our sponsor, Copado. Copado's focus is on bringing the power of DevOps to low-code platforms such as Salesforce, ServiceNow, and SAP. The world of development is changing fast, and a lot of the IT innovation happening in our organizations now is being done on these low-code platforms and being done by people who may not have a traditional software development background. So the challenge is that these systems are becoming incredibly complex. So low-code development may be easy to begin with and easier to get started with, but when you're dealing with dozens or even hundreds of contributors working over the course of months and years, you pretty quickly reach a scale where you need things like version control, automated deployments, automated testing, and value stream management. So that's where Copado helps as the leading DevOps and testing platform for low-code. So if you're managing a platform like Salesforce, ServiceNow, or SAP, check them out at copado.com, get a demo, and find tons of other resources. Now back to our show. And I guess one other thing I wanted to tack on, sort of shifting topic a little bit, is that, and you'd mentioned Agile and DevOps, there's an incredible amount of value that can be unlocked by digitizing something, right? So there's a lot of money in the tech industry. It's one of the top, maybe 3 most money-making industries because of that efficiency gain. But what happens when you've got that much money floating around the system, you don't necessarily notice all the inefficiencies, right? You're able to pay people, pay a lot of people high salaries, work for a long period of time, hire consulting companies, pay for a lot of technology and so forth, but you don't necessarily realize the inefficiency. And so there's this analogy within the lean world that unless you lower the water level in a stream, you won't notice all the big boulders in the stream. And so what we're doing with value stream management partly is we're lowering the water level and we're starting to look like what is the actual work process. So you can begin to see you've got these incredible inefficiencies that are embedded in this whole process as the IT world moves towards maturity as a discipline. It becomes much more competitive, and there's much greater need to optimize, and there's much bigger difference between the teams that have successfully optimized and the teams that have not successfully optimized. And that's really kind of what we're talking about here. Steve, you mentioned, adaptations to knowledge work. Are there any big differences in the world of knowledge work for value stream management compared to manufacturing?
No, I think that there's an interesting point in time right now. We have been in an age for a long time of, a tech boom, and a lot of what drives progress and investment in technology is this idea that you can have high margin value delivery with software because it's you build it once and everybody uses it, and the cost to use it is very, very low, and the value can be extremely high. You look at like software products to manage a sales force, software products to manage all your customer interactions, things that would take extreme amounts of money, giant call centers and stuff like that being automated or augmented and improved with software. And the other kind of magical thing here was like venture capital, right? Venture capital coming in and saying, "Oh, yeah, like we know what a good software product is capable of. We know the return on investment is so high, and there's a lot of competition for that space." So I think that has driven software to a point where it scales extremely quickly because you go from, okay, well, this looks like we have product market fit. Let's throw a couple. Now it's a couple $100 million at it, if not $1 billion at it. Let's scale it up to 100 times, 1,000 times the staff. And essentially, you're doing the same thing. You're just doing it at a higher level and doing a lot of R&D and tackling all these edge cases and things. And now you have an enterprise tier to your product, and there's just ballooning complexity as a result of this investment. And so the water level goes super high, right? The rocks don't go away. The water level goes super high. The river's just rushing at a crazy pace. And then you hit a situation like we're in right now, where we've had market contraction. There's a lot of hesitancy. Folks are pulling back. We're seeing lots of layoffs, lots of companies in trouble. And, so the water has receded, and we're starting to see, that the water's not coming out the other end, right? We're seeing a trickle downstream, but we're not seeing the rocks necessarily unless we have ways of seeing those rocks. And so it's interesting because value stream management kind of got attention a little while ago, a couple of years ago, as kind of the next thing to broaden the scope of what we're thinking about in software development and delivery. But it was kind of a good time, to be working on software. And so the idea of exposing the rocks and finding all the, the challenges and opportunities was a little bit less attractive, I think, because, if things are good, keep on going, scale up, open the floodgates. And, now that we're in a challenging time where folks are really thinking about, okay, we got to tighten the belts, we got to think about where we're investing, maybe, how we're investing in the places that we're investing. And yet, this is the point where they're like, oh, well, let's not do a major initiative to roll out a new software product that's going to manage all of that, because, it might be a big ticket item. It's going to take time to put that into place. And so I'm not sure that value stream management will be something that sees an uptick under this environment, although this is kind of the time you want to be certainly managing your spend and what you're doing with that higher level of visibility. But anyways, to bring that to knowledge work, it's challenging in knowledge work, right? If you want to manage a value stream where you're building and shipping physical products, you go look at the assembly line, right? The factory, and you can sit there with a stopwatch and you can see how long everything takes and where the friction is. I just listened to a podcast today, my morning podcast while I was drinking my coffee, was about how organizations are monitoring all their employees now because of COVID, because of work from home, but also, we're at a point in time where we can track a lot of things. You can install software that tracks things like movements on the keyboard, the trackpad, the mouse, attention, what's active on the computer and in the cloud and in the services that are being used. But it misses a lot of detail, right? It misses a lot of what's valuable for knowledge work, which is creativity, thinking, ideas, discussions, collaboration, walking around the block, right? I mean, if you're tasked with making creative decisions, it's not all capturable in time on keyboard, right? Or even time in a tool. So this is the challenge that I think, a lot of folks struggle with when they think about knowledge work and value stream management, is that your detail and the measurement that you're getting is only as good as the tools that are feeding you that information and what you've got connected to the system that's capturing the data and the shape of that data, right? The data can be in, really challenging form and accuracy. So that, I think, this is something that we're probably going to have to come back to. Like, the challenges of value stream management is an entire episode, a big conversation about what happens when you say, okay, let's deploy the software and put it into place. You quickly run into these challenges in the realm of knowledge work, where trying to capture what's actually happening and where the opportunities are, it really depends on the quality of the data that you're feeding into the system.
So we're mixing a bit the use of software tools to aid with value stream management versus the sort of management philosophy and approach and mindset of value stream management. Would you agree that there's a distinction between those two? Does one come before the other? How necessary is the software side of things?
Great question. And I feel like I've been way too on the mic. So I'm going to say that we should probably talk about value stream management, the practice, the philosophy, the high level in this episode, and then we can come back and talk about the tooling and the software and the technical side of value stream management.
Cool.
But what's your perspective on the philosophy of this? Why should we use value stream management and not process improvement or just lean or any other method of continuous improvement? Like, why does value stream management specifically hold value?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I would differentiate strongly between value stream management and lean and process improvement. Obviously, process improvement's a very big tent. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that fits into that. All of this is process improvement. Value stream management, I would say, I would struggle to differentiate value stream management from lean. I just maybe different names for the same thing. It's really, as I said before, it's looking at whatever parts of the process are repeated, mostly linear parts of the process, looking at that end to end, beginning to get a sense of the metrics going through, beginning to identify where is there waste in that whole process, where are there constraints, where can you make improvements in that process. So I would say keeping it at that kind of broad level, but why that as opposed to just management by default? Like, why are OKRs, for example, not perhaps sufficient if you don't also have a value stream management or a lean lens through things? I would say that back to the water level analogy, there is a phenomenal amount that is hidden from view. Like in a stream, the boulders are hidden beneath the surface. You can't see them. As you pointed out, in a manufacturing process, you can see the movement of stuff through that pipe, through that assembly line. In the software world, things are hidden in multiple ways. They're hidden because they're multiple people working on them. They're hidden because some of them are in the past or some of them in the future. Like, I can't see the past. I can't see the future. I forget exactly about how long it took me to do that thing yesterday and how much time elapsed and so forth. And then information can be scattered across different tools and on and on and on. But so I would say value stream management, it does come back to this idea of breaking the organization down into value streams, into relatively small sets of processes that are actually delivering business value. You mentioned previously the idea of venture capitalists saying, "Hey, look, you've got a product, let's scale this up," and so forth. So they're taking a high level business value focused view of the organization. So investors, board, CEO, that's their job. CFO, that's their job. Take a high level view of the organization in terms of how do they produce business value. But what happens is their perspective gets very, very diluted as you go further down in the organization. And the people who are actually hands-on keyboard or hands-on tool or whatever, they have only a modest connection with that perspective. And so in a sense, it feels like it's a bottoms up point of view about like, let's look from the bottom up at what are we doing? What's the value we're bringing? How do we work together? Not because an investor wants us to, not because our boss wants us to and so forth, but because it's more fun to deliver value than it is to just show up and do a bunch of work. It's actually fun. In a sense, I like the analogy of gamification, right? To look at your work and can I be more efficient? Can I do this better? And there is this, Dan Pink talks about these in the book Drive, talks about these three intrinsic motivators: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So if you're working for the man, you're beholden to the venture capital or to the board or to the CEO or your boss or whatever. That's not giving you that thrill of autonomy. That's not really giving you that intrinsic motivator. But mastery, right? Like, can I be better at my craft? Whether that craft is, managing the finances for the organization, or whether that craft is building software, setting up systems, or handling support tickets, that's your craft, right? I like this. I love this quote from John Shook: "Give the work the respect that it deserves." It's like a mantra: give the work the respect that it deserves. Every job, right, is worthy of respect. It's providing some value to somebody. So get into that, right? Enjoy that mastery. And then the purpose aspect, that third intrinsic motivator, right? Get a better sense about how you fit in. And that's, I think we lack context. If our only context is, I was hired to do this job, I have to show up, I better do my job, keep my boss happy, try not to get fired. Okay, that's fine, but it's not giving you this sense of purpose, right? It's depriving you of one of these fundamental intrinsic joys of work, which is that you're supposed to be doing something useful. There's a reason somebody's paying you, for example, and that's to deliver value. So see that, understand that, take pride in that, and take then this bottoms up approach to optimizing the organization.
I love that. That's very well said. I think that if I'm applying that autonomy, mastery, purpose lens to value stream management, I think all of that gets a lot easier to think about, right? I mean, you've got value, one of the things I love about value streams is that value is a first class citizen, right? Nobody can argue that value stream management isn't about value. And you also can't argue that it's not about flow. And then, I think the management aspect of it is really how you get to this concept of mastery and autonomy, right? I mean, when we have management is really about leadership and continuous improvement, right? It's about understanding the entire system and what's going to make that system better, and better across many, many different dimensions, right? Better for the individual contributors, better for the end customer, better for the entire ecosystem. And I think that value stream management really, when we're talking about what drives people, when I think about autonomy, mastery, purpose, there's another dimension that I think is really important, and it's a sense of progress, right? And that fits under mastery, but it also fits in less big picture and long-term lens. It's about progress in the short term, right? The sense of like, we're moving in the right direction. I'm contributing to something that is actually having a positive effect. And I think that you get that from value stream management when it's properly implemented, right? You, as an individual contributor, are part of a holistic system where you see on a daily basis that you're helping move that system in the right direction to deliver positive outcomes via that system. And, one of the things that I think frames my understanding of value stream management is answering this question of like, by what method, right? And I think this is a Deming question, but it's almost like another mantra. It's like, how is that going to happen? How is value going to be delivered? How are we going to build a sustainable, scalable, high-performing system that works for the customers, the stakeholders, the individual contributors, everybody involved? And I see that the practice of value stream management is really, to me, very much about by what method. How are we going to make this work? This act of working together and striving for positive outcomes. I really like applying that lens of drive to frame, how that connects to individual contributors, right, at the micro level. And one of the things I like so much about value stream management is that really there's something for everybody, right? There's something for customers, there's something for the extreme high levels of leadership, even beyond a company. If I think of being a VC, there's nothing I would like more when I'm doing my due diligence on a prospective investment than to see their value stream management system, right? That would give you so much information about whether you've got a valuable investment or not. And I think we're getting there. I think right now the water level's too high and the expectations are so low that we make these judgments based on all kinds of different things, right? How do we feel about the leader of the company? How do we feel about the market? How do we feel about the state of the technology that's being developed? But we're unable to evaluate the method that all of that is being delivered through, right? What is the machine that represents the company as a whole? Because I would tell you, whether or not it's a sure thing. It might break investment because it would become less a judgment call, less a kind of gut instinct decision, and all just based on data. I think that capability is available certainly inside of organizations today to evaluate whether things are working, whether things are heading in the right direction, and then as individuals and as people inside of that system, whether they can feel like they're moving in the right direction.
And I would contribute just one other detail when you were describing value stream management, value, and stream implies flow, and management. I always love this definition. Management is the allocation of scarce resources, and so the scarce resources are, of course, the most precious resource is time and people's energy and lives, not to mention whatever other investment, so figuring out where we need to make other kinds of investment. But fundamentally, value stream management is primarily about managing time and effort. Your people, where are your people spending their time? And once you see where time and effort are being sunk, then you can much more easily justify if you need to buy a tool here, or upgrade a server there, something like that. All of that is secondary to, and fundamentally, nobody wants to manage you. Like, nobody really wants to. It's such a massive pain to try to keep tabs on what somebody else is doing. It's hard enough to keep tabs on what we ourselves are doing. That's the only area we have really strong leverage. So a team that is practicing value stream management, taking some responsibility for their own contributions and being, honest and tracking data on how things are going and so forth, they don't need to be managed to any significant degree, right? Keep coming back to this, the definition of information as that which reduces uncertainty. The purpose of information is to reduce uncertainty. When you look at a venture capital firm investing in a company, there's a phenomenal amount of uncertainty. And that's what the world of investment is primarily about, making bets on the basis of overwhelming amounts of uncertainty. And one of the places where you get uncertainty is when you look down an organization. You can't get the granularity you need to make accurate decisions. So don't take that as the sole, don't take that as the sole mechanism to run a company. And that's the fundamental difference between value stream driven, and lean driven processes versus hierarchical top-down processes. Hierarchical top-down processes assume that we can get an adequate level of granularity from the top and at each, successive level to understand really what's going on at the bottom. And argument from the point of view of lean is that you'll never get there. It's just you're always losing information at every layer of the org chart. What you need is in addition to or complementary to some top-down point of view, you need a bottoms-up point of view where people legitimately like their job. They're driven by a sense of purpose. They want to improve. Teams are managing themselves. Teams are looking at the process. Teams, realize they don't want to spend more time or effort on things if they don't have to. And so that's really what we're trying to advocate for, is that kind of bottoms-up process optimization to a great degree.
From my understanding is we're moving to smaller and smaller increments of work, smaller and smaller bets, less uncertainty from a scale perspective, but more sort of continuous experimentation, moving forward, knowing just enough to take the next step, and then evaluating that step. Are we moving in the right direction? Was that the right call to make? How should we place our next step? And this is kind of like reminds me of Simon Wardley's "Crossing the River by Feeling the Stones," I think is what it's called. And it's kind of like, you just take that step. Okay, that can support my weight. Where should I place my foot next? All of that would be trivially easy if the water level was way down, right? And so we're increasingly moving in this direction of smaller bits of information, smaller bets, motivating this project to product evolution, right? Projects being giant bets that you tie up a ton of time, a ton of capital, a ton of effort. You ship everything probably late, and people either get promoted or fired, and it's just an incredible amount of risk and waste if it was a wrong step. And this product evolution, this move towards smaller bets and more continuous experimentation and adaptation means risk goes way down. Our sense of certainty goes way up. Our sense of progress goes way up, right? Very hard to feel whether you're headed in the right direction when you've got project milestones. But if you get the sense that you're building a machine to deliver value, you start to get the sense that you've built something that's working, right? And it's actually moving in the right direction. So I think that this is driving a lot of the attention behind value stream management, because it's facilitating our ability to do that extremely effectively, right? To think of our organizations more mechanistically in the ways that they should be, and allowing us to be more creative in the ways that we should be, right? Be more human in the human ways, automate the things that really are not playing to our best capabilities as human beings. I see value stream management as a major piece in that puzzle in unlocking that level of getting rid of all the stuff that we shouldn't be doing and doing much more of what we should be.
So, as always, very, very fun to have a chance to chat with you and think through this
Likewise.
stuff, Steve. Yeah, and look forward to more detail in future episodes on value stream management, tooling, and so forth. So, thank you, buddy.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Please rate, review, and share the podcast. And make sure to visit us at valuestreamshow.com to sign up for our newsletter and find show notes, episodes, and more.